Hello, everybody. Welcome to Latter-day Struggles. This is Valerie again, right back at you, and very, very excited to be here with you today. I have to be honest with you. I had to take a pause before I hit record here today because I just had an interview with an individual, and it was not just touching, but kind of heartbreaking to me. And so I needed to take a few moments to regroup, while also not wanting to take too many minutes because I wanted to have my conversation with them fresh on my mind so that I could share with you a few things that I have learned. So those of you who follow this podcast are aware that on Monday, something interesting happened too. Well, many interesting things happened. And one of them was that I dropped a podcast with a good friend of mine and somebody who is in one of my support groups, Jason, a former faculty member at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. That very same day, by a complete coincidence, an article was published in the Salt Lake Tribune that talked about the loss of jobs that several faculty members at Brigham Young University, Idaho, recently had because of some updates and changes. Well, I guess maybe I should be careful and specific here. The suspicion is that it has to do with these upgraded, is that the right word? Upgraded? The add-on temple recommend questions, I guess I should say. And how troubling that article was on the heels of some of the other things that we're all sort of navigating through and working through here in our church home at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so coincidentally, of course, these two happened on the same day, and I had several of you generously send me links to that article that came from the Tribune. And it really gave me pause, of course, like it probably gave many of us pause. I did not know, in fact, that these temple recommend questions had been added and that the confidentiality of some of the faculty at the church universities had undergone a compromise, I guess. I actually was so curious about it when I learned about it myself a few months ago that I approached Jason and I said, that can't be true. Is that really a thing? And he said, yes, it is. And so it was new to me. I guess it's a new thing. And in the spirit of being charitable, my thoughts are, I don't know that it was an intended abuse. And yet here we are. It has had some very unintended consequences. And it is harmful to the people that are victims of this new policy. So I think it's healthy and helpful when articles of this nature are published because they help us understand what's going on, and they may even help those who have implemented the policies better understand some unintended consequences and the harm that is being done in the spirit of trying to do something that maybe they thought was helpful, and it's coming to be more and more obvious that it's not helpful. It's actually hurtful. So I have been in connection with a professor at Brigham Young University, Idaho, and today I just finished an interview with them. They were not willing to come on the show for very obvious reasons. They are of the feeling, and legitimately concerned that if they were to speak up about their experience at the university, that they would lose their job. However, they did very generously offer to listen to or to be interviewed by me and talk about what it's been like and what their own experience of employment for CES has been, especially as it applies to Brigham Young University, Idaho. I mentioned before, this was really painful for me to actually listen to and learn about. And the reason why I've been very open about I am a BYU Provo graduate, and I am a proud Cougar. And so when I hear about some of the struggles that are currently going on in the church education system, it pains me. It's painful. As I listen to them talk to me about their own experience, it became even more personal because I experience on their behalf as we spoke. I experienced a lot of deep emotion from them. So let me just offer to you, I'm going to walk you through what we talked about. I'm going to give you fair warning from the gate here. This is probably going to be a little bit more of a sort of a free association kind of conversation that I'm going to be having with you, mostly because we did just sort of have an open conversation and it was a little bit less structured. And I wanted to jump on here and offer it to you as quickly as possible so that I didn't lose any of the important points and the experience and the emotional experience that I had as I spoke with them about their experience. So I asked them initially, what brought you here to your job at Brigham Young University, Idaho? And they basically said that really, as much as anything, it had to do with it being a good opportunity. The pay was good, cost of living is good, good clean air, clean water, a nice place to raise a young family. And so they also mentioned that there are enough benefits in the logistics of working at BYU Idaho, but they also said that it was in some ways had the feeling of becoming a sort of golden handcuff like situation, meaning that it was good enough and there were enough benefits there that it felt challenging to walk away and go elsewhere, because there were some benefits from the lifestyle perspective. That's probably true, especially of rural Idaho, as opposed to maybe other university towns and whatnot. They also mentioned a lot of positive things and experiences with other faculty, which was very similar to the conversation that I had with Jason that you just listened to a few days ago, and that was very rewarding. And they also said that there is profound love for their students. It's clear that when someone goes the route of education, they do so because they love their students and they love teaching. They love being in connection with students, and they love being mentors and part of the developmental experience and the growth of these adolescents and young adults, and walking them through this very formative part of their lives. And that actually was what brings this individual a great deal of joy and also a great deal of pain and suffering as they watch their own students suffering in this setting and in this climate. When I asked about what were some of the basic overarching general impressions of employment with the church, especially at BYU Idaho, their response was a variety of things, and I'm going to just walk you through. They said that it really tended to have a very different feel based on the varying presidents of the university, and through their experience with the university. And I guess they had gone through, by default, if I were to do what they were saying is they've been through more than one president, that in some parts of their career, some of the presidents and company administrations were much more approachable. And they mentioned the word professionalism, that there was more of a sense of professionalism, that if there were questions and if there were concerns, these were things like in any professional environment, one could go and discuss and speak and have a conversation and feel seen and heard. And in certain administrations, this individual said that was the case. Whereas in other let me see if I can use my words here. In other administrations, that was very much not the case. So much so that this individual said that there was an evolving sense that this was more a church school rather than a school sponsored by the church. And so what felt, at least from my listening ears, like an evolution from a university that was supported by the institution, but the faculty and the staff had the trust of the institution of the church that they could handle some things on their own. It was no longer, or less so that, and now more so, basically a church-owned institution that they really had a lot of motivation to control what was going on at the grassroots. This was extremely confusing to this individual that I spoke with, because they mentioned that it seemed strange that there was an increasing amount of control through the years, because as they looked around at the people they worked with, they said there was just such good, kind, loving people in the faculty and staff around them that the idea of needing to crack down was completely incongruent with reality on the ground. And so they noticed that with a little bit of curiosity, like, I don't know what's necessarily going on over at headquarters that is bringing up so much fear, perhaps, or need to feel like they need to control us and crack down, like on the Temple Recommend situation and on other situations that this person has noticed has evolved away from more autonomy and towards more control. This individual spoke to me about an increasing feeling of feeling like they were at risk, being, doing, speaking in ways that felt honest and congruent to them. There was a sense, or is a sense, that even if they were to speak up about something that they felt was actually pretty benign, that there would be a population of others, students or faculty, that may even misunderstand how they feel or what they're saying, misconstrue it, and interpret this as something that was not strictly 100% compliant with the brethren, and that they could be reported, and without anybody following up with their own experience or what they meant, they could get in trouble. And this individual said that they are not the paranoid kind of person, that this is not something that they are used to feeling. But in this environment, more and more, there's a feeling that to be authentic is risky, even if they aren't trying to be edgy or trying to do anything that is rebellious, or really how they experience themselves as not being an edgy person, but actually just wanting to express their own thoughts and feelings and opinions about a variety of issues. When I asked about the culture of the university, they shared with me that it's a very, very disturbing kind of experience, at least for this person, and what they have noticed in this culture is that it's a culture of silence. And they gave me some examples of that I found to be very interesting and honestly a little bit distressing. They mentioned that issues of mental health are not addressed in their opinion very well. This individual mentioned that not very long ago, there were 3 suicides on campus or around campus amongst, I don't know if it was students, or I believe it was a combination of students and staff or faculty. And that's a pretty big tragedy for a small community like Rexburg, Idaho, and that this individual noticed that nothing was said. It was completely silent. This individual also has noticed that there are no clubs for various topics of interest. There are no clubs for international students. There is no organization that encourages free or complex thinking on campus. This individual also mentioned that there's a culture of silence around anything that has to do with race, gender, or sexuality. And that this individual has just noticed that this is very troubling because, once again, if you're somebody who lives on the margins, there's no conversation about this, and that it's a very, very lonely kind of place for anybody who is in any kind of real struggle having to do with race, gender, or sexuality, or even somebody that is perhaps here from another country, that those kinds of conversations are not discussed. They are not brought up, that anything that might draw attention to somebody having a different way of thinking or feeling or self-experiencing or self-expressing is just simply not mentioned. This individual also said that they have noticed over the years that there's one single topic that is disseminated via mass email, and it has been over the dress code. that there's almost a little bit of a pathological kind of focus on the dress code. And this particular faculty member that I was visiting with said that has been something that they have noticed because, like any university, there are a myriad of things that are going on under the surface that are important and deserve attention, notice. They deserve being dealt with openly and honestly. And that it's very, very challenging and very troubling that over and over again, it has more to do with, are you enforcing, talking about, encouraging your students? Are we living the dress code? This individual actually made the analogy that it's almost like they think, the administration, at least to this individual, said, it's almost like they think that the students at Brigham Young University, Idaho, are all beehives and deacons, 12 and 13-year-olds who are going to sit through a standards night as the answer to every complex question having to do with gender and sexuality and other issues around mental health and spirituality, and take it in and just take it at face value and not think about it, not question it, not challenge it, maybe even internalize it, and they're just going to go on their way. But this individual also said, but these students that come to this university and the kids these days in general They're not having that. And so they're not taking it in like that. And as a consequence, there is a great deal of struggle. There's probably, we were in our conversation probably oversimplifying, right? But just in the spirit of trying to sort of make sense of this scenario or this situation up there, this individual talked about there being roughly 3 different kinds of students. They mentioned that there are the Orthodox kids, the ones who go up there and they may not even see a problem at all, that everything feels great and they fit in and they are very happy there. This individual mentioned that there's a second category of students, and this number has been growing and growing and growing in the years that they have been at the university. And this is the group of students who are struggling. They're questioning things. They're really challenging, especially some of the narratives around our social progressive issues, especially issues of gender and sexuality that we're all being confronted with in the world, inside and outside of the church. And this particular cohort of students, they have nowhere to go. They have no voice. And so many of these students are handling this in a variety of different ways. One thing that this professor mentioned was that there is a bit of an underground network where students talk to each other and discover who others are that they feel safe in going to and talking to about what they're experiencing, whether they're experiencing something themselves as a gender or sexual minority, or whether they're just an ally and somebody who feels deeply to their core that the way that the university or maybe the church is not being loving to some of the people that they love and care for. And so there's this underground network where people find others that will help them feel seen and known and help them feel that they are not alone in this struggle. And many of these students, this faculty member said, have every intention of just straight up leaving the church the second they graduate from BYU, Idaho, because there's such a culture of silence and fear that they don't have the space or the ability to metabolize what they're feeling and find home in this community somehow in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. These same students oftentimes feel that if they share what they're really experiencing, how they're feeling, how their beliefs are evolving, and how their thinking is complexifying. Is that even a word? Complexifying. I'm going to roll with it. But these students stick around and they want to stay and get their degree because they're worried, some of them, that if they show up as real, that their parents may respond in a way that will hurt them and where they will lose either their emotional support or their financial support or something like that, where these kids are sticking it out, but they've left emotionally and spiritually. And that's a tragedy, of course, because we want these beautiful, bright minds to feel that their voice matters and that they have something infinitely precious to add to our struggling institution. And yet they don't feel that. And because they're at the university in these very tender years where these kinds of experiences, thoughts, and feelings are not welcome, but are actually silenced, and that they're sort of surrounded by a culture of fear for 4 years of their education, that living under that, especially, as students are young and neurologically developing as best as they can, but they don't have a lot of resources that way. They check out. They just check out. They decide they don't want to be in that kind of an institution, especially where they don't feel like they can be real and have people that they can talk to. So this faculty member mentioned that these students in their underground network tend to find and help each other out, know where they can go and to whom they can speak, whether it be amongst themselves in the student body or amongst other faculty members that can help them feel seen and known and loved and like what they're experiencing is valid and honorable, and so that they don't feel quite as alone. When I asked this faculty member if they would share with me what it has been like for them to witness this, the struggle and pain that this individual themselves are feeling and that their students are feeling and that they've just witnessed over the years, they began by actually helping me understand how they saw that in their estimation, there could be some perhaps doctrinal foundation to the philosophies of BYU Idaho. And the way they described it to me was this, and I found this very, very interesting. This is what they said, that there are different understandings of God. There's an Old Testament understanding of God, And then there's a New Testament understanding of how Jesus Christ changed in some ways the nature of how we can see and experience God. And I know we've talked quite a bit about this in our earlier episodes, especially in the one that Nathan and I shared about our understanding of the real, what we think is a healthy understanding of the infinite and eternal nature of the atonement of Jesus Christ, which is that it is an all-consuming love that Jesus Christ and God the parents have for us. Whereas there are also other understandings of God, especially God the Father, that God the Father is an angry God, a punitive God, a controlling God, and that this God needs to exact vengeance upon his children to get his children to be afraid enough to behave well. And what this faculty member said to me was, I wonder if that is the God of the policies and procedures of this university, that we don't necessarily lead in and encourage love. And even as this faculty member was talking, we sort of related back and forth that when one moves into a different understanding of the worship of Jesus Christ through the atonement, and even an evolving and changing understanding of God the parents, that they are not somebody who is, they're not frightening. They are not needing to be, that we don't need a savior to protect us from God the Father and God the Mother. We don't need a savior to protect us because they are not scary. They love us. They want us to be with them. They want us to return to them. And so when we have that different understanding of the love of God and of the infinite nature of Jesus Christ, then there doesn't need to be a relationship that is based on power and control. And this faculty member shared with me that a better way to think about that kind of relationship between God and their children was to think about the prodigal son. And this kind of God is one that awaits for their children. Those of us who are out there doing our lives and making the mandatory mistakes that are part of what it means to grow and evolve and learn the things that we are able to learn to help us return back to our heavenly parents. The God of love is the God of the prodigal son. The God of fear and control is what we notice in the Old Testament. It's a different kind of God. And so the question, or the thing that we were kind of playing, the idea we were playing around with was, we can look at the God that an institution worships, or that a family worships, or that an individual worships, sometimes based on the way they treat and handle the people around them and even handle themselves. And so as I was closing the conversation, I asked this individual, I said, what would you like? What do you wish we could do better at the university, in your case, or in the church at large, for all of us? And this is what they said. It was really, really a beautiful lesson to me. They said, we as members of the church can be like the father of the prodigal son. We can be welcoming and loving to those who go away. And what the faculty member talked to me about also, when I said, what is your experience like? How has it felt to watch this wave of students that you notice that come, that feel alone, that have to find their allies, and that share with each other and you that they're going to leave the church after this because they feel so constrained and they feel so unseen and unheard in this environment. And this individual said that they felt deep grief because these are precious students. And what this faculty member said was, I want these people in my communities. I want these people in my church. Sometimes people say it's their loss because they left. And this faculty member said, that is not true. It is not their loss. It is our loss. Those of us that stay with the body of the church and try to maintain something that looks like a healthy or a trying to get healthy body of the church, we are the losers when we lose this young generation of students who do not feel like there is a place for them because they have been silenced in their very legitimate and honorable questions. This faculty member also said, I am not afraid of God on the behalf of these students who leave. I know that God is going to have them in their hands. The faculty member also said, it is a loss to us and to our communities, church and otherwise, when we run students off the way we are running them off because of the culture that is perpetuated in institutions like this one. So as we think about this, It's my hope that we can allow this kind of a conversation to be something that just lovingly shines a spotlight on some of the struggles that we're having here as a church and as an institution. It is my belief that nobody wakes up in the morning and tries to forward policies and procedures and doctrine and theology that hurts people. I don't believe that for a second. I believe in the well-meaning natures of all of us. And yet also at the same time, I feel like when we see harm, we need to point it out. We need to look after the victim. We need to look after the least of those vulnerable populations. And in some cases, I think those vulnerable populations include, of course, people of the minorities, gender, sexual, racial minorities. I also think it's important to think about in cases like this, that sometimes there are pockets inside of the church that need to have special attention paid to them. We need to think about the faculty members at Brigham Young University, Idaho, and other places where they are doing really beautiful work. They love their students. They want to do well by the kids that come through there and the young adults, and they don't have their confidentiality protected, or it seems in some ways that perhaps they are not trusted. They're not trusted to be able to be people of honor, people of virtue, people of integrity, to teach and mentor and guide these students without the heavy hand of the institution over them. An institution that does also love and care for the students and the faculty, but maybe don't necessarily understand the harm that is being done. And so I hope that this podcast will help us all better understand the harm that is done, and that it'll be received from a place of at least my love and my compassion and my care for the students, for the faculty members that most recently were fired from their jobs or they were not renewed at Brigham Young University, Idaho, because of some unethical practices, and that you'll know of our love and support for you. And I want to thank the individual who was willing to talk to me today for sharing their own very generous and kind, but also very direct perspective on what they see going on at a potentially beautiful institution that also, of course, has beautiful things going on as well. I think we have to remember always that there is good in the worst of us and bad in the best of us, and that includes institutions and universities and human beings and families and countries and all kinds of communities. So this is a complex subject. And yet at the same time, I think even though it is complex, I think it is very important that when we see something, we need to talk about it. That the most truth can be revealed when nothing is done in darkness. And so that's what this podcast is for you today, is just talking about how we can see what's going on, shine the spotlight on it so that we can help people and help the institutions around us become more psychologically and spiritually healthy. So good to be with each of you today. Please share this podcast episode with your friends and loved ones. And I'm also very excited to have so many of you that I know personally now because of all of my ongoing support groups that are running almost every day of the week. If this is something that interests you, please feel free to reach out to me at info@valeriehamaker.com or on Instagram at that Latter-day Struggles podcast. And also, if you're interested in individual coaching or therapy around faith expansion, you can reach out to me at that same handle and at that same email address. I do some very limited coaching myself, and I also am set up to have others that work with me and for me, helping you out. So thank you for your ratings and reviews. Please keep them coming. It is my honor and my privilege to do this work with you to help us all become more psychologically and spiritually whole. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.